During my husband's funeral, my own children carved up his inheritance behind my back. The daughter I sacrificed everything for said, "We don't have any space for you in our lives, Mom," and offered me her garage. I simply smiled and nodded. When they returned a year later to get a piece of my new life, they learned that the only inheritance that mattered was the one they had already lost. I'm glad you're here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. After the inheritance was divided, none of my children wanted me around. The daughter I had sacrificed the most for, the one I had supported through every hardship, offered me only her garage. "We don't have room for you in our lives, Mom," she said. "I'm glad you're here." The grandfather clock in the hallway struck 3 times as I stared at the faces of my children gathered around the dining table. My dining table, in my home, the house where I had raised them, tended to their injuries, celebrated their victories, and soothed their heartbreaks. "Mom, you need to be reasonable," Carolyn said, her voice calm and professional, the same tone she used with difficult patience. My daughter, the accomplished doctor, the one for whom I had given everything. "Reasonable?" I managed, my voice trembling. "You divided your father's inheritance among yourselves without even speaking to me. And now you expect me to sell my home?" Michael, my eldest, avoided my gaze. "Mom, Dad's will was clear. The assets were to be split among his children." "And what about me?" I asked quietly. 42 years as his wife. The question hung in the air like a storm cloud. Nobody answered. "We've discussed it," Carolyn continued, tapping her manicured nails on her coffee cup. "You can stay with us." For a fleeting moment, hope flickered in my chest. Maybe they did care. "In the garage," she added flatly. "We converted it. There's a bathroom. That's all we can offer." "We don't have room for you in our lives, Mom." The garage, a space like an old car they didn't want in the house but couldn't bear to part with. "Carolyn," I whispered, "I paid for your medical school. I worked 2 jobs while caring for your father." "I'm grateful," she interrupted, her tone anything but sincere. "That's why I'm offering you a place to stay. Michael and David aren't even doing that." My son shifted uneasily but said nothing. David, my youngest, just stared at his phone, detached. When had they all grown so cold? Michael cleared his throat. "The market is good. You'll get a decent price for the house." "This is my home," I said, my voice breaking. "Your father and I built this together. We planted those trees out front when you were born." "It's just a house, Mom," Carolyn said with a sigh, exasperated. Just a house. The walls that had witnessed decades of our family's life. Just bricks and mortar to them. "You have 3 weeks to decide," Michael announced, standing. "If you don't want to sell, you'll need to buy us out. Otherwise, we've already spoken to a realtor." They had already contacted a realtor without telling me. As they gathered their things, a crushing reality sank in. I was 65 with limited savings and nowhere to go. My husband's pension had ended with him. My meager teacher's pension barely covered groceries and utilities. "I'll text you the moving company's information," Caroline called over her shoulder. They're very efficient with seniors. The door closed behind them, and suddenly my home of 40 years felt alien, as if even it was preparing to reject me. I walked slowly to the mantel, picking up the family portrait from our last vacation. We were smiling, happy. When had that changed? When had I become a burden to be shoved into a garage? That night, lying in the bed I had shared with Harold, I stared at the ceiling. "What am I supposed to do now?" I whispered toward his side, empty for nearly a year. The silence that answered me was deafening. 3 days later, I stood in Caroline's converted garage. The concrete floor was covered with a thin, cheap carpet. A folding screen separated the toilet and shower from a twin bed that looked like it had been salvaged from a dorm. A small desk doubled as dining table and workspace. Bare cinder block walls painted stark white accentuated the coldness of the space. "It's all we can manage," Carolyn said, arms crossed defensively. "We're using the spare bedroom as Jason's home office now, and the kids need their space." I nodded, unable to speak. This garage, the afterthought of my life's devotion, was my reward. "You should be grateful," Carolyn added, checking her watch. "Some elderly parents end up in terrible facilities." Elderly? When had I become elderly in my daughter's eyes? When had I transformed from mother to burden? I sat on the edge of the thin mattress after she left. My suitcases still packed at my feet. Through the small window, I could see into the main house. Carolyn was already on her phone laughing as if she hadn't just confined her mother to a concrete cell. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. After a lifetime of giving, I found I had nothing left. Not a single piece of myself remained, not even a place in my children's hearts. The first night in Caroline's garage, sleep eluded me entirely. Every unfamiliar sound, the low hum of the water heater, the occasional car rolling past, kept me alert. Perhaps it wasn't the noises at all, but the weight pressing on my chest, the disbelief that still refused to settle into acceptance. I lay on the narrow bed, my mind drifting backward through the years, like flipping through a well-worn photo album where every page captured my hands in service to others. I remembered Harold's diagnosis 15 years ago, Parkinson's. The neurologist had delivered it so clinically, as if reporting on the weather rather than the slow decay of my husband's body. "You'll need help," he said, but help was a luxury we couldn't afford, not with 3 children still needing college tuition. So my hands learned. They learned how to administer medications, how to bathe a grown man with dignity, how to massage cramping muscles at 3 in the morning. They picked up needles and threads, taking sewing jobs I could do from home, balancing my hours between fabric and caregiving. While Harold rested in his armchair, I remembered the endless mounds of mending, the wedding dresses I altered, the curtains I hemmed, anything to keep our household afloat as the medical bills piled higher. My fingers would bleed, pricked countless times, raw from constant labor. Yet I kept going. What choice did I have? Caroline had been in medical school during those years. The irony was bitter now. I had worn myself to exhaustion so my daughter could learn to heal others, while she seemingly never learned to care for her own mother. I rose and walked to the small window, staring out at the darkened yard. A light glowed from Caroline's kitchen. Was she up late, poring over medical journals as she always claimed, or simply enjoying the spacious home she had while I was confined to this concrete box? I remembered the summer of Caroline's residency when she had called me in tears, overwhelmed by the demands of her program. "I can't do this, Mom," she sobbed. "It's too much." Even though Harold needed me, I packed a bag and stayed with her for 3 weeks. I cooked, cleaned, and listened as she wrestled with the trauma of losing her first patient. My hands had wiped her tears then, just as they had when she was a little girl, terrified of thunderstorms. When her twins were born a few years later, I was there again. Jason, her husband, was launching his architecture firm, working 16-hour days. I moved in for 6 months, rocking colicky babies through endless nights, changing diapers, sterilizing bottles. My own sleep came in broken fragments, snatched between cries. When I finally returned home, Caroline kissed my cheek. "I don't know what I would have done without you, Mom," she said softly. "You're amazing." Where was that Caroline now? When had gratitude hardened into cold dismissal? I opened my still unpacked suitcase and pulled out an old journal, the leather worn smooth from years of handling. Harold had given it to me on our 20th anniversary. "Write your dreams," he had said, "not just ours." But the pages held little of my personal dreams. Instead, they chronicled the daily struggles and small triumphs of our family. Michael winning the science fair, David's soccer championship, Caroline's acceptance to medical school. I flipped to an entry from almost 30 years ago, April 15th, 1994. The university called today. "They're holding a place for me in the master's program next fall. After all these years, I might finally finish my education degree. Harold says we'll make it work financially." Caroline's piano lessons are expensive, but she's so talented. I couldn't possibly ask her to give them up. Perhaps I can pick up more sewing jobs on weekends. I never returned to that master's program. Caroline's piano lessons evolved into competitions, then prestigious summer programs, and eventually became features in college applications that highlighted both her musical and academic achievements. I closed the journal, my chest tightening with a nameless emotion. Not regret, not resentment, something lodged between the two. Something tasting of sacrifices unacknowledged, invisible, unrewarded. The next morning, Carolyn knocked on the garage door at 7 sharp. "Mom, we need to talk about house rules," she said immediately, skipping any greeting or concern for how I had slept. "We can't have you coming and going at all hours. It disturbs the twins." "House rules?" I thought bitterly, as though I were a tenant rather than her mother. I nodded silently, noting the dark circles beneath her eyes, the same eyes that had once looked up at me with complete trust and dependence. "And we'll need you to contribute to groceries, of course. Just because you're living here doesn't mean you get everything for free." My hands, the very hands that had fed her, clothed her, nursed her through illness, clenched, unheated, and exhausted. I spoke almost involuntarily, but forced my voice to remain steady. Of course, I said, wondering how I would stretch my modest pension to cover anything extra. As Caroline rattled off another set of rules, I lowered my gaze to my hands. They were older now, speckled with age spots, the knuckles swollen slightly from decades of work. These hands had served my family faithfully for so many years. Now they rested empty, accomplishing nothing for anyone. 2 weeks passed in Caroline's garage. Each day brought a fresh wave of humiliation. The concrete walls seemed to shrink closer with every passing hour, pressing in as I struggled to adjust to this new life. A life where I was not family but a burden, an imposition. The garage's shortcomings became more pronounced with time. When it rained, water seeped in under the door, dampening the thin carpet beneath my feet. The space heater Caroline had grudgingly provided barely kept the morning chill at bay. At night, I could hear the faint scuttling of mice in the corners, uninvited roommates in my concrete box. One morning, Caroline barged in without knocking. "We need to talk about bathroom schedules," she announced. I was still in my nightgown, a fact she ignored entirely. "Bathroom schedules?" I echoed, clutching my robe tighter around me. "You can't use the main house bathroom between 6:30 and 8:30 a.m. That's our family time." She emphasized family as if I were no longer part of it, and preferably not between 3 p.m. and 9 p.m. either. The kids need space. I glanced at the tiny shower stall tucked into the corner of the garage. The water pressure was pitiful, and it took 10 minutes just to rinse shampoo from my hair. The hot water never lasted more than 3 minutes. Caroline interrupted my thoughts, voice clipped. "Mom, you need to understand. We're making sacrifices to accommodate you. Jason is already irritated enough." My heart sank. Jason didn't want me here. Nobody expected to have their mother-in-law living in the garage, she continued with an impatient sigh. We had plans for this space. Her words cut deeper than I wanted to admit. I had become nothing more than an inconvenient intruder, a wrench in their carefully organized lives. Later that day, I ventured into the main house for a cup of tea. The twins, Emma and Ethan, were sprawled across the couch, engrossed in video games. At 13, they had reached the age where any attempt at grandmotherly affection was met with eye rolls. "Hi, kids," I said, forcing cheerfulness into my voice. Ethan barely lifted his eyes. "Mom said we're not supposed to let you use the TV." "I just came in for tea," I stammered. Emma snickered. "Grandma, your stuff is in the garage, remember? Mom says you shouldn't be in here when she's not home." I froze, the empty mug dangling from my fingers. My own grandchildren had been instructed to police my movements. When had I become a trespasser in my own daughter's home? Back in the garage, I noticed my few belongings had been moved. The photo of Harold and me, which I always kept beside my bed, had been turned face down. Hands trembling from a mix of grief and simmering anger, I set it upright. That weekend, Caroline hosted a dinner party. Unsurprisingly, I wasn't invited, though laughter and conversation filtered through the thin garage walls. I recognized Michael's voice, David's too. My own children were gathering just 30 feet away, and I wasn't welcome. When the doorbell rang again, I peeked through my small window. It was Helen, my closest friend for over 30 years. Carolyn welcomed her warmly and ushered her inside. Helen knew I was living here, so why hadn't she come to see me? 2 hours later, as guests began to leave, Helen glanced toward the garage. Our eyes met briefly through the window, and she quickly looked away, following Caroline back inside. Even my friends were choosing sides. Later, there was a soft knock. Carolyn stood there, arms crossed. "Mom, I need you to help clean up. The housekeeper isn't coming until Tuesday." Not, "Would you like to join us?" Not, "Sorry we couldn't include you." Just another demand. As I scraped plates and loaded the dishwasher, Caroline and Jason discussed their upcoming vacation to the Bahamas right in front of me, never acknowledging that the woman washing their dishes had been deliberately excluded from the gathering. I noticed the beautiful serving platter I had received as a wedding gift among the dirty dishes. "That was your grandmother's?" I asked quietly. Caroline barely looked at it. "Yes, and now it's mine. Dad wanted us to have the family heirlooms." "I don't remember him saying that," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. Jason interjected, his tone dripping with condescension. "Elizabeth, we've been through this. The inheritance was clear." I said nothing more, continuing my work. What was the point of arguing? The next morning, an itemized bill had been slipped under my door. At the top, in Caroline's precise handwriting, It read, monthly contribution. The handwriting on the paper blurred slightly as I stared at the numbers. Rent, $400, utilities, $150, food, $300, Wi-Fi, $50. The total, $900, gnawed at me. My entire monthly pension barely reached $1,200. I sank onto the edge of my bed, the paper trembling in my unsteady hands. This wasn't living with family. This was something darker, a quiet exploitation masked as generosity. Later that afternoon, I found myself folding laundry in the corner of the garage I'd been forced to call my kitchen. The sunlight filtered through the open window, carrying the sound of Caroline's voice on the phone. "It's exhausting having Mom here," she said. Her tone was casual, almost pleased with herself. "She acts like she's some honored guest, but really she should be grateful we didn't put her in a home." A pause. "Well, if she complains about the bill, I'll just remind her how much we spent on Dad's medical care. It's time she carried her own weight." I pressed my hand to my mouth to stifle a sob. After everything I had given, after every year I'd devoted to caring for Harold, after emptying my retirement account to help Caroline with the down payment on this very house, this was the verdict she had passed on me. I was a burden, a parasite, an inconvenience to be tolerated. That night, sleep eluded me. The truth settled over me like a shroud, heavy and suffocating. I had no home anymore, no sanctuary, no place where I truly belonged. Surrounded by the scattered remnants of my life in the cold silence of the garage, I finally let myself weep, the tears tracing a path down my cheeks as the evening air, unusually chilly for May, whispered through the open door. I walked the 3 blocks back to Caroline's house, my part-time job at the local thrift store barely covering the demands she placed on me, yet offering a rare respite, a place where I was treated with some measure of dignity during the day. The aroma of pot roast, Harold's favorite, drifted through the air, greeting me as I neared the house. Through the dining room window, I saw them all gathered around the table: Caroline, Jason, the twins, and Michael's family. David, as usual, was absorbed in his phone, a family dinner I wasn't invited to. Quietly, I slipped back into the garage, my appetite gone. They wouldn't miss me. They never did. "Grandma?" A small voice pulled me from my reverie. Emma stood in the doorway, clutching a plate of food. "I thought you might be hungry," she mumbled, her gaze fleeting, avoiding mine. My chest swelled with a fragile warmth. Perhaps not all connection was lost. "Thank you, sweetheart. Would you like to sit with me while I eat?" I asked softly. She glanced over her shoulder, hesitant. "Mom said I shouldn't stay out here too long. She says you get difficult when you get too much attention." The warmth drained from my chest like water slipping through fingers. I nodded, forcing a tight smile. "I see. Thank you for the food." So, after she left, I picked at the meal, noticing that not a bite of the sweet apple cobbler I could smell baking had been left for me. Even in this small gesture, I was an afterthought. Later, as I washed my plate in the utility sink, raised voices rose from the house, and curiosity drew me closer. "Can't keep doing this," Michael was saying. "It's not sustainable. What do you suggest?" "You and David aren't exactly stepping up," Caroline's sharp voice replied. "We could sell the vacation property," David offered cautiously. "Use that money for her care." "That's our inheritance," Jason cut in, his tone cold. "Why should we have to spend it on your mother?" My stomach plummeted. They were speaking of me as if I were a problem to be solved, a burden to be offloaded. "The garage situation is temporary," Carolyn said. "I'm looking into other options. Assisted living costs a fortune," Michael replied. "Unless we find somewhere basic. No frills." "She doesn't need anything fancy," Caroline said. "Just somewhere with medical supervision. She's becoming forgetful." I pressed my hand to my mouth. Forgetful. I had once forgotten to pay her bill on the exact day she demanded it. Once. And now I was forgetful? "What about her things?" David asked. "The stuff still in the storage from the house." "Sell it," Caroline said flatly. "Most of it's outdated anyway. We can use the money for the facility's deposit." I backed away from the door, legs trembling, heart hammering. They were planning to institutionalize me, to liquidate my possessions. Harold's beloved books, our wedding china, the antique desk where I had written countless love notes to my husband, all to fund some cold, impersonal facility without my consent. I sank onto my bed, my mind spinning. This couldn't be happening. Yet every detail bore witness to the truth. The garage that was never meant to be a home, the expenses devouring my pension, the way they spoke about me instead of to me. I was being erased. A soft knock interrupted my spiraling thoughts. Michael lingered awkwardly in the doorway. "Mom didn't realize you were back," he said, avoiding my gaze. "Clearly," I replied, voice steadier than I felt. He shifted uncomfortably. "We were just talking about some family matters." "Yes, I heard. Selling my things to pay for my care in some bargain basement facility," I said, bitterness cutting through my words. Michael's face flushed. "You were eavesdropping." It's impossible not to overhear, especially when the words are about disposing of me. "Mom, it's not like that," Michael said, but his voice held an awkward defensiveness. "We're just trying to figure out what's best for everyone." Everyone, except me, it seemed. He ran a hand through his hair, the motion hauntingly familiar, like Harold used to do. "You're being dramatic. We're trying to help. By selling my things without asking? By making decisions about my life without including me? You call that help?" My voice trembled with barely restrained fury. "You're not thinking clearly," he said, his tone slipping into that familiar condescension. "You're emotional." Those words, so casual, so dismissive, ignited a fire inside me. I straightened my shoulders, forcing my spine to remember its strength. "I am emotional, Michael. I am your mother. I carried you for 9 months, raised you for 18 years, and loved you for 42. If that doesn't earn me the right to my emotions, what does?" His eyes narrowed. "See, this is exactly why we need to—" "Need to what?" I snapped. "Lock me away? Pretend I don't exist?" "I'm still here, Michael. I'm still the woman who taught you to read, who nursed you through chicken pox, who co-signed your first apartment lease." His expression hardened, and I saw the invisible wall rising between us. "That was a long time ago." "Not to me," I whispered, each word carrying the weight of decades. "To me, it feels like yesterday." After Michael left, I sat on the edge of my bed, frozen, watching shadows stretch across the concrete floor. Dust motes floated lazily in the slanting light, as though the room itself mourned me. The reality of my situation pressed down with the heaviness of a tomb. My children saw me not as a person to be loved, but as a problem to be solved. I was utterly, unbearably alone. Later that night, long after the dinner guests had departed, the garage door creaked open. Caroline stepped in, her silhouette framed by the dim glow from the house. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice sharp and clinical. "About your future arrangements," I thought, but I kept my mouth closed. I looked at my daughter, my beautiful, accomplished daughter, who had once crawled into my lap for comfort during thunderstorms, and all I saw now was a stranger. "I know about your plans," I said quietly. I heard everything. Caroline's mouth tightened, a line of tension that betrayed her impatience. "Then you understand why we need to make changes. This situation isn't working." "No," I said softly, "it isn't." She continued as though I hadn't spoken. "We found a place. It's not fancy, but it's clean. They have activities, medical staff." "Stop," I interrupted, my voice firmer than I expected. "Just stop, Carolyn. I am not going to a facility. I am not selling my possessions. And I am not going to be treated like a burden by my own children for one more day." "Don't be ridiculous, Mom. Where will you go? What will you do? You can't afford—" "That's no longer your concern," I said, surprising even myself with the calm authority in my tone. "You've made it very clear that I am not part of this family anymore. So be it." Her expression flickered between irritation and uncertainty. "You're being childish. You need us." Those 3 words crystallized everything inside me. You need us. Not we love you, not we want to help you, but you need us. A declaration of power, control, dominance. "No," I whispered, soft but unyielding. "I don't think I do." Without another word, Carolyn left, clearly convinced I would come to my senses by morning. But as I sat alone in the stillness of my garage prison, moonlight filtering through the small window, something inside me shifted. I was Elizabeth Anderson. I had raised 3 children, supported my husband through 15 years of illness, and built a life from nothing. Strength I had forgotten existed surged back to me. I reached for my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in months. "Diana, it's Elizabeth. I'm sorry to call so late." "Yes, I'm all right. Actually, no, I'm not all right at all. I need help." By the time dawn broke, I slipped out of Caroline's garage with a single suitcase in hand. Hours had passed as I carefully chose what I would take: my wedding photograph, Harold's pocket watch, the faded birthday cards my children had made me when love had been unconditional. I left a note on the small desk. I've made other arrangements. Don't worry about me. Short, simple, and likely ignored. Likely, Diana was waiting in her car at the end of the block, just as promised. Her silver hair gleamed in the early morning light, her smile warm, reassuring. "Oh, Lizzie," she breathed, embracing me as I sank into the passenger seat. "I should have checked on you sooner." "You're here now," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "That's what matters." I didn't look back at the house where my daughter lived, couldn't bear to see the garage that had been my prison for the past month. Instead, I focused on the road ahead, each mile carrying me closer to something I hadn't felt in years. Possibility. Diana lived in Oak Ridge, a modest retirement community about 40 minutes from the city. Her apartment was small but bright, with windows overlooking a courtyard garden. "It's not much," she said, guiding me inside, but I didn't care. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe again. The spare room was mine for as long as I needed it. It was small, barely large enough to fit a twin bed and a modest dresser, yet it had something the garage had never offered: warmth. A handmade quilt covered the bed, and fresh flowers brightened the windowsill. Diana had prepared everything with such quiet care that it made my chest tighten. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice catching with emotion. "I don't know how to ever repay you." Diana waved my words away with a gentle hand. "Remember when Harold first got sick? Even after Tom died, you still found time to sit with me every day. Some debts, Lizzie, don't need repayment. They just need to be passed forward." That afternoon, as we sipped tea in Diana's sunlit kitchen, my phone rang. Caroline. I let it slip to voicemail. Then it rang again. Michael, and then David. Suddenly, one after another, my children had discovered a pressing need to speak with me. "Aren't you going to answer?" Diana asked, watching me. I set the phone face down on the table. "Not yet. They'll leave messages." And they did. Caroline's message came first, her voice tight with irritation. "Mom, this is childish. Where are you? Call me back immediately." Michael followed, his attempt at concern landing somewhere between patronizing and worried. "Mom, we're worried about you. This behavior isn't helping your case for independence." Finally, David's message, the briefest of all. "Mom, just come back. You're making things complicated." Not one of them said they loved me. Not one asked if I was safe, if I was scared, if I needed anything. Their worry wasn't for me, it was about the inconvenience my absence caused them. With a silent shake of my head, I deleted all their messages, leaving them unanswered. Days passed at Diana's in a gentle rhythm. Mornings were spent reading in the garden, sunlight spilling over pages as birds flitted through the branches. Afternoons were for exploring the community center, where residents gathered for book clubs, card games, and art classes. Evenings were for cooking simple meals together, sharing stories, memories, and quiet laughter. One week flowed into the next. My children's calls became less frequent, their messages sharper with irritation than care. I wasn't ready to speak with them. Not yet. "You'll have to talk to them eventually," Diana said one evening, folding laundry beside me. "Not for their sake, but for yours." "I know," I admitted, threading a sock onto its mate. "But not until I figure out what comes next. I can't stay here forever." Diana paused, her hands resting on the towel she held. "Actually, I've been thinking about that. Margaret in 3B is moving to Florida next month to be near her daughter. Her apartment will be available." My pulse quickened. Could I possibly afford it? My pension was modest, supplemented only by Social Security. "Yes," Diana smiled, reading my doubt. "Several residents here live on fixed incomes. There's a sliding scale for rent." Hope, fragile and tentative, stirred in my chest like a small bird I thought had long since died. "You think I could qualify?" I asked, a flicker of disbelief in my voice. "I know you could," Diana said. Then she hesitated as though weighing her next words. "And there's something else. You mentioned you used to sew. Did you know we have a little shop in the community center? Alterations, mending, custom work. The woman who ran it moved to assisted living last year, and no one's taken it over." I stared at her, memories flooding back. The careful stitches I'd sewn into wedding dresses, the curtains and slipcovers I had made to help supplement our income when Harold was ill. "I haven't sewn in years," I whispered, doubt lingering in my throat. "But you could again," Diana said gently. "Your hands remember, even if you think they've forgotten." That night, I dreamed of fabric, silk, cotton, wool, slipping through my fingers, transforming under my touch. For the first time since Harold died, I woke with purpose. The next morning, Diana took me to meet Evelyn, the community manager. A no-nonsense woman in her 60s, Evelyn listened as I explained my situation. "We have many residents who've been abandoned by their children," she said matter-of-factly. "It's the shame of this generation." She showed me the vacant apartment, small but perfect, sunlight streaming through the bay window in the mornings. Then she led me to the sewing room, dusty from disuse, but with two serviceable machines. "We need someone," she said simply. "Residents miss having alterations done in-house. Many can't drive to the mall anymore." My heart raced as I ran my fingers over the machine, the familiar shapes and knobs. Could I really start again at 65? "I'd need supplies," I said cautiously. "Thread, scissors, measuring tape." "We have a small budget," Evelyn replied, "and a waiting list of people needing alterations. You could start tomorrow if you wanted." Walking back to Diana's apartment, my mind whirled with possibilities. A place of my own, work that mattered, people who valued what I could contribute. I was so absorbed in thought that I almost didn't notice the car parked outside Diana's building, Carolyn's sleek silver BMW. My stomach dropped. She stepped out as we approached, her face set in that tight, practiced smile she always used when she meant to show patience she didn't really feel. "Mother," she said, her voice clipped, almost cold, "you've led us on quite the chase." Diana gave my arm a gentle squeeze, a silent reassurance before slipping inside, closing the door behind her and granting us privacy. "How did you find me?" I asked, my voice calm, almost unnervingly so, considering the storm of feelings swirling in my chest. "Phone GPS," Caroline said matter-of-factly. "I'm listed as your emergency contact, remember? I can always track your location." I let her words settle. Of course, the invasion of my privacy should have felt shocking, but it didn't. Not anymore. Caroline's tone shifted, almost like she expected compliance. "It's time to come home," she continued. "This little adventure of yours has gone on long enough." I looked at her, really looked at her, and in that moment I didn't see the daughter I had raised. I saw a stranger, a person who regarded me not as a mother, not as a human being with thoughts and desires, but as an object, something to be controlled. "No," I said simply. Caroline blinked, momentarily thrown off script. "What do you mean, no?" I took a steadying breath, feeling the calm certainty that had been growing in me for a year. "I mean, I'm not coming back to your garage. I'm not going to a facility. I'm staying here." Her face hardened, disbelief etched into every line. "Don't be ridiculous. You can't afford to live on your own." A small, confident smile spread across my face. The certainty I felt wasn't arrogance. It was hard-won resolve. "Watch me," I said. 1 year. 1 whole year had passed since I walked out of Caroline's garage with nothing but a suitcase and an unshakable determination. I now stood in my modest apartment, the morning sun spilling through the bay window, illuminating a life I had painstakingly stitched together piece by piece. Each day was a careful reconstruction of freedom, of dignity reclaimed. The sewing room at the community center had become my sanctuary, a place where thread and fabric transformed into more than clothing. They became acts of care and respect. What began as simple adjustments, hemming pants, taking in waistbands, had grown into something far more significant. I created custom garments for elderly bodies that the fashion world ignored, dresses with hidden adaptive features for women with aching joints, pants with dignified closures for hands that no longer moved with ease. Slowly, word spread. Requests came from neighboring retirement homes, from families who wanted their elderly loved ones to feel seen, from people who valued craftsmanship over mass production. My hands, once idle and confined in that cold garage, now worked daily to restore dignity and pride. A knock at my Doppler interrupted my reflections. Diana stood there, radiant in the lavender dress I had sewn for her birthday. "Ready for our Sunday brunch?" she asked, her smile sweeping into the room. "They're expecting us." I thought of the circle of women waiting for us, the 6 who had become my chosen family. Women discarded by society, overlooked by families, passed over by a world that prized youth above wisdom. Together, we had built a bond stronger than blood. As we walked to the community dining room, voices called out greetings. "Elizabeth, the blouse fits perfectly." "Elizabeth, can you take in my jacket next week?" Each acknowledgement wrapped around me like warmth, a reminder that here, I mattered. The dining room hummed with conversation and life. Our table by the window was already half full. Ruth, a retired librarian, Marianne, who had fought tirelessly as a civil rights attorney, Pearl, a mother of 5, who had raised her children alone after losing her husband far too soon. Women with stories, wisdom, and lives still unfolding. There she is, Pearl's voice rang out as we approached. The miracle worker who made me look 10 pounds lighter in my grandson's wedding photos. Laughter bubbled around the table as I took my seat. These Sunday brunches had become sacred, a space to share triumphs and frustrations, a place to remind ourselves we were seen and valued. Did you hear back from the hospital? Marianne asked, passing me the coffee carafe. I nodded, still feeling the disbelief in my chest. They wanted 24 adaptive gowns for the geriatric ward, designed with dignity in mind, they said. Cheers erupted at our table, drawing curious smiles from nearby diners. From a neglected garage to a thriving entrepreneurial endeavor, all within 1 year. To Elizabeth, Diana said, raising her coffee cup in a toast, who taught us it's never too late to begin again. As our cups clinked, I felt a fullness in my chest, a sense of belonging that had nothing to do with pride and everything to do with connection. After brunch, Diana and I strolled through the community garden, enjoying the late spring blooms. My phone buzzed, an unusual event these days. The screen displayed a name I hadn't seen in months. Emma, my granddaughter. My hands trembled slightly as I answered. Hello, Grandma, she said. Her voice was smaller, softer than her 14 years suggested. It's me, Emma, she added. I know, sweetheart. How are you? I asked, my voice threading concern with warmth. I'm okay. A pause, then a whisper. Mom doesn't know I'm calling you. Of course not. Carolyn had made it clear 6 months ago. If I refused to return to her supervision, I was erased from the family. Are you all right? I pressed gently. Yeah, Emma said, her voice barely audible. I miss you, and I wanted to tell you something. I got an A on my sewing project. My heart swelled with a love so deep it almost hurt. Before I left, I had secretly taught Emma the basics of stitching during clandestine visits to Caroline's garage. Sewing, Caroline insisted, was useless, obsolete, and Emma should be focusing on coding instead. That's wonderful, I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. What did you make? A skirt, she replied. It's not very good. Not like what you could do, but my teacher says I have a natural eye for it. My voice trembled slightly, thick with feeling. I'm sure it's beautiful, I added, barely able to keep my emotions in check. A pause followed. Then her voice came again. Mom still talks about you sometimes when she thinks we aren't listening. I think she misses you, even if she won't admit it. I hesitated. Could that really be true? My mind flickered with doubt, yet I didn't want to weigh Emma down with the complexities of adult emotions. Perhaps, I started, my words soft. Could I come see you sometime? I've been saving my allowance. I could take the bus. Diana squeezed my arm reassuringly, though she could only hear my side of the conversation. I would love that, Emma, she said, but we should talk to your mother first. She'll say no. Emma's voice dropped, carrying a quiet defeat. Then we'll wait, I said gently. We'll wait until she's ready. I'm not going anywhere. After the call ended, I sank onto the garden bench, letting the swirl of emotions wash over me. Joy, apprehension, a tiny spark of hope. It was all there, tangled together. Your granddaughter? Diana asked, sensing the weight in my silence. I nodded. She wants to visit. She's learning to sew. Diana smiled softly, so the thread continues. The following Saturday, I was bent over a length of fabric, carefully measuring for a new project, when a stir at the community center entrance caught my attention. I looked up to see Caroline standing in the doorway, Emma peeking from behind her. My heart stuttered, then raced. Caroline seemed thinner, the shadows under her eyes more pronounced than I remembered. Mom, she said, her voice tentative, almost unsure. I set my scissors down deliberately, steadying myself. Carolyn, this is a surprise. She scanned the sewing room, taking in the orderly tables, the ongoing projects scattered in mid-progress. The bulletin board crowded with thank you notes from clients. Emma told me about her phone call, she said slowly. I was angry at first. Then I realized it's been a year, a whole year without her mother. A year I've thrived, without my children. You look well, she continued, her voice carrying a question rather than a statement. I am well, I said simply, my words steady. Emma edged forward, stepping from behind her mother, her eyes shining with excitement. Is this where you work, Grandma? It's amazing. I smiled at her enthusiasm. Would you like to see what I'm making? As Emma eagerly joined me at the cutting table, Caroline lingered at the doorway, her posture stiff, uncertain. She was accustomed to controlled spaces, operating rooms, immaculate homes, meticulously managed relationships. Here, in this informal, creative chaos, she felt unbalanced. After showing Emma a few basic techniques, I glanced up and noticed Caroline examining one of my adaptive dresses displayed on a mannequin. "This is remarkable," she murmured, running her fingers over the hidden magnetic closures. "You designed this?" I nodded. "Yes, for people with dexterity issues, it looks like a regular dress, but is much easier to put on independently." A flicker passed across her face, perhaps recognition of the skilled, capable woman she had once raised, rather than the burden she had relegated to the garage. Emma interrupted with excitement. "You're selling these to hospitals now?" "Yes," I said, "and taking private commissions. I'm actually quite busy these days." Caroline's gaze swept the room, her eyes taking in everything and recalculating, reassessing. Finally, she spoke. "We should talk, Mom, about everything. Maybe dinner sometime." A year ago, I might have leapt at the offer, desperate for any connection to my children, but I wasn't that woman anymore. "I have dinner with friends on Wednesdays and Sundays," I said, "but I could do lunch next Thursday." Her eyes blinked, clearly expecting an immediate yes. "Yes, Thursday works," I confirmed. As they prepared to leave, Emma hugged me tightly. "Can I come back soon? I want to learn how to make a dress like that one." "Of course, sweetheart, any time," I whispered. Caroline hesitated in the doorway, her words faltering. "Mom, She stopped, seemingly unsure how to continue. I waited, neither pushing nor pulling, letting the silence stretch. "You've built something good here," she finally said. I didn't know you could." It wasn't an apology, not quite, nor was it a full acknowledgement of the pain she had caused. But it was a start, a recognition that I existed beyond the narrow confines of mother, dependent, or burden. "There's a lot you don't know about me, Caroline," I said softly, "but perhaps it's not too late to learn." After they left, Diana found me sitting quietly at my workstation, emotions too complex to name swirling inside me. "How was it?" she asked. I considered her question carefully. It was a beginning, not of what was, but of what might be. That evening, I stood at my bay window, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. The same sun that had set on my old life now rose over my new one. Caroline might return to my life, or she might not. Michael and David might follow, or they might remain distant. Their presence or absence no longer defined me. I was Elizabeth Anderson. I had survived being discarded. I had rebuilt myself from scraps, just as I now crafted beautiful quilts from pieces others might have thrown away. The future stretched ahead like an uncut length of fabric, full of possibility. And my hands, these capable, weathered hands, were ready to shape it, stitch by careful stitch, into something beautiful.